Hello, my name is Yousefzadeh, and my study focused on the relationships between perceptions of democratic government quality, political stability and freedoms, and migration patterns within Europe and North America. So I go to John A. Miller Great Neck North High School, and my mentor was Jessica York. So in a globalized world, migration has become a major trend, especially as a result of the rise of immigration from Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia to countries in North America and Europe. In 2020, the United Nations recorded that there were 281 international migrants, which is 3.6% of the world's total population. Through previous research, the first study found that declines in democratic tendencies within the country often facilitates emigration and results in reduced immigration. The second study found that corruption is both a strong push factor and a deterrent to immigration, with countries experiencing higher corruption also often facing higher emigration rates. The third study focused on migrants leaving Spain and Romania, and this study found that discontent with political factors was a major factor causing Europeans to migrate to other European countries. So, research questions. The first objective was to test if perceptions of democratic quality predict immigration and emigration rates within Europe and North America. The second objective was to test whether political stability and freedoms predict immigration and emigration rates within Europe and North America. Hypothesis. So the first hypothesis was there would be no significant relationship between perception of democratic quality and immigration rates. The second hypothesis is that there won't be a significant relationship between perception of democratic quality and emigration rates. Hypothesis 3 was there would be a significant negative correlation between emigration rates and political stability and freedoms. Hypothesis 4 was there would be a strong negative correlation between political stability and freedoms and immigration rates. So for my methodology, in gaining data on immigration and emigration rates, I used the website CIA 2020 Net Migration Rates Country Comparison. So from this website, data was collected on the net migration rate of each country in 2024 per 1,000 citizens. For emigration rates, data was collected from the website United Nations International Migrant Stock. So this website had data for the amount of people who were born in each country and now live somewhere else. I used this data as a substitute for emigration rates since I wasn't able to find an exact value for the emigration rates for all of the countries I was researching. Similarly, data was collected from this website, for the same website, for the percent of each country with its population, which were immigrants. And again, I used this as a substitute for immigration rates since I wasn't able to find an exact value for the immigration rates for each country I was researching. So for perceptions of democratic government quality, data was collected from the European Union website European Commission to measure public opinion about how people feel about the political situation in their country. So specifically, I gathered data from a question which measured the percent of people in each country satisfied with how democracy in their country is currently working. For political stability and freedoms, I gained data from the website Freedom House, which collects data pertaining to how free the citizens of each country are. So for each country, there was a freedom score, which is a sum of a political rights score and civil liberties score. As in the United States has a freedom score of 84, which is a sum of the political rights score and civil liberties score. As well, I gathered data from this website about if each country was free, partially free, or not free, which is a categorization dependent upon the country's freedom score. In order to analyze the relationship between the level of freedom given by Freedom House with the migration rates of a country, so one-way ANOVA was used. So furthermore, a linear regression model was used to analyze the same relationships in order to determine the extent to which there is a significant linear relationship between these factors. So in order to analyze the relationship between percent of people satisfied with how democracy was working, with both the percent of population who are immigrants and the migration rate per 1,000 people, linear regression tests were used in order to analyze the extent to which there were linear relationships between these factors. So the results. So political freedom and immigration rates. So one-way ANOVA and linear regression model were used to analyze the data. So one-way ANOVA found that countries with a level of political freedom categorized as free and immigrants making up a higher percent of the population, but not necessarily by a significant amount, since this relationship had a p-value of 0.06. However, the linear regression model showed a positive relationship between these factors with a p-value of 0.0007, indicating a strong relationship. So this, for discussion, so the linear regression model showed that countries with greater political and social freedom usually had higher immigrant populations, while one-way ANOVA showed differences in immigrant percentage among the different categories wasn't necessarily significant. So these results show that although countries described as free on average had higher immigrant populations, it can't be concluded if these results occurred by chance or are actually significant. Overall, these results align with the hypothesis that there will be a positive correlation between immigration rates and political freedoms and stability in a country. So a one-way ANOVA and linear regression model were used to analyze the data relating the relationship between political freedoms and net migration rates. The one-way ANOVA had a p-value of 0.002, so countries categorized as free had an average net migration rate of plus 2.7 people per 1,000 people, which was a lot higher than both countries categorized as partially free and not free. The linear regression model had a p-value of 0.73, however, indicating there was no statistically significant linear relationship between political freedoms and net migration rates. So the one-way ANOVA demonstrated that political freedom may have a strong influence on whether a country gains or loses population through migration. However, although the one-way ANOVA showed a statistically significant relationship, so the low p-value of the one-way ANOVA showed that the statistically significant relationship is not a linear relationship. The results from these two tests show that although the relationship between level of freedom in the country and its net migration rate was statistically significant, overall this relationship was not a linear one. So the results for perception of democratic quality and immigration rates. So the linear regression model was used to evaluate the linear relationship between perceptions of democratic quality and percent of the population of a country which were immigrants. And the linear regression model had a slope of 0.297 and again a very low p-value indicating statistical significance. So in order to analyze the relationship between perception of democratic quality and net migration rate, a linear regression model was used to evaluate the extent to which there is a linear relationship between these two factors. So the linear regression model has a slope of 0.05 and a p-value of 0.156. So a linear regression model found that the countries where people are most satisfied with how democracy is working had a higher percentage of immigrants in the population, and this contradicts the hypothesis that there be no relationship between these variables. So furthermore, there's no significant relationship between the percent of people in the country who are satisfied with how democracy is working and emigration rates. This result confirmed the hypothesis that there would be no significant relationship between these factors, as well as previous studies which had contradicting results. Furthermore, there was no significant relationship between the percent of people in the country who are satisfied with how democracy is working and the net migration rate of that country. So the main conclusion from this study is that countries with higher levels of political freedoms and a higher percent of citizens who were satisfied with the country's democracy had higher immigration rates. So these findings suggest that factors such as democratic stability, civil rights and liberties, and political freedoms are important pull factors that are important for attracting migrants. So these results highlight how a stable democratic government is an essential factor needed to facilitate immigration. So future work could focus on how economic and social factors work with political factors to influence migration patterns. And as I said before, the acknowledgments to Jessica York, who provide guidance and oversight for my project.